On to the trace minerals. Just a reminder, trace minerals are not less important than the major minerals. They are just required in smaller amounts in the body. The first one is iron. The RDA for males is 8 milligrams per day and 18 milligrams per day for females. This is the only mineral or vitamin that females need more than males. The upper limit is 45 milligrams per day, and the roles in the body, it plays a part of hemoglobin and myoglobin, and it also participates in energy metabolism. Good food sources of iron are red meat, fish, poultry, shellfish, eggs, lots of animal foods, but also legumes and dried fruits. The deficiency symptoms: anemia, which makes people feel weak, fatigued, have headaches, impaired performance, inability to regulate body temperature. And another symptom is pica, and that is the craving and consumption of non-food substances. So they've linked iron deficiencies with the craving and consumption of non-food substances. I usually like to talk about My Strange Addiction. If you've ever seen that TV show, many of the people on that show, first of all, most of them are women. And secondly, a lot of them, it's mostly about them eating things. They're addicted to different non-food items. So I've seen rocks, I've seen dirt, starch, drywall, what makes up your wall. There's a number of different ones, but it's typically related to an iron deficiency. Some toxicity symptoms: if you have too much iron, you could have GI distress, and iron overload, which we normally see in men, leads to infections, fatigue, joint pain, organ damage. I also have a picture of this cast iron skillet because iron can be leached out of the pots and pans that you're using. And provide some iron. So cast iron skillets are another good way to get some iron. There are two different forms of iron. There's heme and there's non-heme iron. Heme is only found in animals, and it is the best absorbed form of iron. So non-heme is found in both plants and animal foods, and it's not as well absorbed. So if you're a vegetarian, you're not eating the heme variety, you are probably mostly eating the non-heme variety. Still, you can get enough iron that way. It's just that you have to eat more of it to get the same amount because it's not as well absorbed in the human body. Zinc. The RDA is 11 milligrams per day for men and 8 milligrams per day for women. The upper limit is about 40 milligrams, and it does interfere with copper metabolism. Sources, again, protein-rich foods: shellfish, meats, poultry, milk, and cheese. And oysters tend to be the number one source of zinc. It stabilizes cell membranes and DNA, large role in immune function, growth and development, the synthesis, the making, storage, and release of insulin. It's involved in blood clotting and your thyroid hormone function. Some of the deficiency symptoms could be, in children, would be stunted growth and delayed sexual maturation, impaired immune function for anyone, hair loss, and loss of appetite. And if you have too much, you can also have a loss of appetite, impaired immunity, decreases your HDL cholesterol, that's your good cholesterol, and it affects how you absorb copper and iron. So if you have too much zinc, you will not be able to absorb as much copper and iron. Copper, 900 micrograms per day, and the upper limit is 10,000 micrograms. The role in the body is it helps metabolize iron, and it defends your body against oxidative damage, so it's an antioxidant. Sources are legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grain, shellfish, and if you live somewhere that has copper plumbing, just like the iron from the cast iron skillet, you can get copper from your copper plumbing. Copper deficiencies, they are rare in the United States, but you could have anemia or bone pain, and toxicity symptoms it usually leads to some sort of liver damage. And there are some genetic disorders that affect copper status. There's Menkes syndrome, and that's a decreased level of copper. And there's Wilson's disease, which is an increased level of copper. So this here, I like this picture because it's a blue eye, but you can see this brownish ring around the outside, and that shows an excessive amount of copper. Manganese, its AI is 2.3 milligrams per day for men, 1.8 milligrams per day for women, and the upper limit is 11 milligrams per day. It's a cofactor for a number of enzymes that facilitate energy metabolism, and it also plays a role in bone formation, a whole bunch of minerals in our bones. We can get it from grain products, nuts, green leafy vegetables. It's very rare to have a deficiency, and toxic levels cause nervous system disorders. Iodine. Iodine is, the RDA is 150 micrograms per day with an upper limit of 1100 micrograms. The roles in the body, it is part of the 2 different thyroid hormones that help regulate the growth and development and metabolic rate of humans. So I have a picture here of the thyroid gland right surrounds the trachea. And sources are seafood and salt that is iodized. So there's salt and then there's iodized salt. Most salt in the United States does contain iodine. And the reason why it was done was to avoid goiter. If you have a deficiency or a toxicity of iodine, you can have a goiter. And basically it is your thyroid gland grows larger. So it's called a simple goiter. A deficiency can also result in cretinism, and that's usually found in children, and it results in poor growth and severe intellectual deficiency. Toxicities can also grow goiters, or they can also have an underactive thyroid gland or elevated TSH levels. Selenium, 55 micrograms per day with an upper limit of 400 micrograms. It is an antioxidant, and it does also help regulate the thyroid hormone. Sources, it's found in seafood, meats, milk, eggs, Brazil nuts, and whole grains. And deficiencies are rare. They're really only seen in one small province in China. And there's it's called the Keshan province, I believe. It's a small remote place where the soil in this area has no selenium in it. And if there's no selenium in the soil, that means there's no selenium in the food that they grow. And it's a remote area, so they don't have, like a Walmart to go to. So the children grow up and they have this heart disease that has fibrous cardiac tissue. So very rare, but can happen. And if you get too much selenium, you could have hair loss, brittle nails, a garlic breath odor, and also nervous system disorders. Fluoride. Fluoride is another one of the trace minerals. I want to mention that it is not essential. We need fluoride to prevent cavities, but if you didn't have it, you still could survive. Males need 4 milligrams per day. Females need 3 milligrams per day. The upper limit is 10 milligrams. The functions are that it strengthens your bones and teeth and prevents dental caries, so it prevents cavities, but not truly essential for life. Sources, we can get it from our tap water. That's if the place where you live puts fluoride in their tap water. So if the municipality fluoridates their water, then it'll be in the drinking water. If they don't, then the pediatrician would have to prescribe a fluoride pill. Most bottled waters don't have fluoride, so even if you have tap water, fluoride in your tap water, but you don't drink the tap water, then you're not going to get the fluoride. It's also found in tea and fish. And like I said, if you don't get it, you could be more prone to cavities. And if you get too much, that's what this picture is here. This is called fluorosis, and it turns the teeth brown. So fluorosis is if you get too much fluoride. Chromium. Chromium is another one that we're not quite sure. It's not necessary. Adequate intake for males is 35 micrograms per day and females is 25 micrograms per day. It enhances insulin action, so it's really not necessary in the body, but it does help our body use glucose because it enhances insulin action. So it also helps maintain our glucose homeostasis, but even without it, there are other actions that happen in the body to maintain glucose homeostasis. So where do we find it? We find it in all unrefined foods. So that's all not processed foods. We can find it in liver, brewer's yeast, and whole grains. Deficiency is hyperglycemia. So it's a diabetes-like condition that does not respond to insulin. So someone might be diagnosed with diabetes, however, they don't have diabetes, and maybe they just have a chromium deficiency. And when that is, treated and fixed, then their hyperglycemia goes away. And there are no known toxicities. And the last trace mineral is molybdenum. 45 micrograms per day is the RDA with an upper limit of 2 milligrams per day. It's a working part of several enzymes, and some of the sources are legumes, bread, grain products, leafy green vegetables, milk, and liver. There are no known deficiencies, and toxicity is rare, but if it does happen, it could cause kidney damage or reproductive problems. So I just wanted to mention that there are other minerals. There are more than 5,000 naturally occurring minerals here on Earth, but we don't need them all, and some of them are harmful to our bodies. So our body only requires 14 minerals. Like I said before, fluoride and chromium are not required, but they are found in pretty decent quantities in the body. There are other trace minerals that are found in the body, and they have beneficial roles, but they're still being studied. No DRI has been established yet, and that's nickel, bromine, vanadium, cobalt, and boron. And lastly, I just want to talk about the contaminant minerals, because there are lots of those that get into our food supply that shouldn't actually be there. So there are, I'm going to talk about 3 different contaminant minerals, and basically when they get into the body, they can impair how we grow, how our body functions, and basically our general health. So we can have contaminants of heavy metals, and this happens through soil, water, and air pollution. So I think on the next slide I have a graphic that it'll make sense. Lead, it is chemically similar to iron, calcium, and zinc. So when lead gets into the body, it basically it's taken up in the body, just like iron and calcium and zinc would be. So it can get into those receptors and block the absorption of iron, calcium, and zinc. So we find it in older cities that have lead pipes, and as the lead pipe corrodes, that lead leaches into the water supply. And like I said, it displaces the nutrients from their metabolic sites. So iron, calcium, and zinc get displaced. Children's, infants, and fetuses are particularly vulnerable to lead poisoning. And if a child has an iron deficiency, they're even more vulnerable than just being a child. I don't have a number, but it increases their vulnerability. And the exposure to lead has been linked to nervous system problems, many learning disabilities, short growth, so they don't grow as tall, impaired hearing, and impaired formation and function of blood cells. The other 2 minerals are mercury and cadmium, and I have this picture here because mercury is released from burning coal and other fossil fuels, and this picture even shows volcanic eruptions. So mercury is released into the air. When it rains, that mercury falls to the ground, and then it gets into the water supply. Most of the mercury that we eat is from contaminated fish, because as it gets into the water supply, it accumulates in fish. The larger the fish, the more contamination. So large fish are pose the greatest risk to humans, and those are fish like swordfish, shark, mackerel, and tilefish. And cadmium is absorbed into plants and animals that we eat, and it can also cause cancer in humans. So these are just 3, lead, mercury, and cadmium are just 3 contaminant minerals that are discussed in your textbook, but there are more. And now, this is my closing thoughts on nutrients. We've talked about all 6 classes of nutrients: carbs, proteins, fats, water, vitamins, and minerals. And so when we're thinking about food in general and eating, we want to look at foods as not delivering a single nutrient, but multiple nutrients. And when you do that, all the nutrients kind of work together in your body. So it's important to eat from all of the food groups, and that variety, not only among the food groups, eating from all of them, but variety within the food groups, key to adequacy in your diet. diet, getting enough. And when you balance all the food groups and eat healthy, which is low in fat and sugar and high in fiber, you're going to have a much better outcome and reduce your risk of chronic diseases.